Hi, I'm Callie and welcome to Kapowski Reads and welcome to week 3 of 75 booked. I'm going to start this video with some very important information. The swans have had their babies. We went for a walk and we saw the swans who had been sitting on their eggs and they were swimming up the river, and you could just see in those little wings babies. Obviously couldn't see them close enough because they were being enveloped by their mother's or father's wings, but the swans have had their signets and I'm delighted. I also have 2 books that I'm starting this video with. We will probably have a few more, but who knows. First is Weird Fucks by Lynne Tillman. I am a third of the way through this book. It is not long, it's just a teeny tiny novella which is short vignettes about this woman's sex life, basically, in their weird and wonderful different ways. The book was originally, I don't think it was written in the 80s, but it's set in the 80s. So there's a little bit of a very different outlook towards sex and sexuality, and that's very interesting for me to read. I also think the cover is stunning. I am such a sucker for book covers that have artwork on them. I love it. And I'm also a third of the way through. A third of the way through this book feels very different to a third of the way through this book. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. This book is about 2 magicians, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. They are in early 19th century England. The Napoleonic Wars are happening, and it is considered, and it is thought that magic no longer exists, but these 2 guys are like, ha, we have magic. And so far, there's just been a lot of arguments. A lot of rich, privileged men arguing with each other. There have been some little fairy elements with a fairy sort of king, and I'm liking those bits. I'm loving those bits more. I'm just not really enjoying anything with Mr. Norrell, really. I just don't like him, but I've got like 700 pages left and I'm hoping we're going to get more fairy tale elements, or maybe is it too much to hope that there's an antagonist for Mr. Norrell? I'm hopeful, like maybe I could finish this book this week. I think that's a big dream, but I'm off work this week and next week because it's my birthday next week, and my treat to myself is 2 weeks off of work because I wanted 2 weeks off of work to cry about being 40. So maybe I've got time that I can finish this book. I don't know. Anyway, we'll find out in the video. I don't know what I'm going to read when I finish this. We will cross that bridge when we come to it because I want to live in the moment and read and enjoy this first before thinking, what's next? No, I don't want to do that. I want to read this, enjoy it, and then tomorrow, because I'll finish it today, tomorrow I will think about what's next. But for today, my whole plan is just to play Stardew Valley. I have updates. I have finished reading Weird Fucks by Lynne Tillman, and this is a bit of an odd one because it was a fine enough book, but it was just so, look how tiny it is. It's so short. There just wasn't enough time. There weren't enough pages to really get into the book before it moved on to another vignette. I did enjoy the variety of sometimes wacky romantic entanglements described in the book, but there was no character development. There were no real characters. Well, obviously there were names, but the stories were, 3 to 5 pages long. There weren't many that were longer than that, and it's just not enough time to get any sort of grasp on who these people are so that you can really have any care for them. The book was initially published in 1983, so some of the stories are a bit older than that. There are references to the, I think, 72 Olympics. So there are some very dated terms, attitudes, descriptions, and I was taken aback by one instance and just thought that I was not expecting that in this book at all. And there were no warnings about it. It was just over very quickly, but it was very unexpected. I did feel a little uncomfortable with some of the terms that were used in the cultural descriptions. They did feel maybe they were of their time, and that's, I don't know, that's something to consider when a book is published so long after it was initially written. I just felt like there were a lot of harsh depictions of the local people in the various settings of the stories. I did ultimately have a good time. I was entertained, but I feel I can't give this more than 3 stars. It was too short. I didn't get really, there wasn't a chance to get into it before it was over. I also want to give a part 1 update on Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. There are 3 parts in this book, so I felt that makes sense. It's 1,000 pages long. I cannot just go, I'm reading a book and then come back and be like, done. The first part of this book is just named after Mr. Norrell. We do have the 2 gentlemen, Mr. Norrell and Jonathan Strange, meeting, and I am not enjoying this book so far. I have had a few friends tell me it gets better, and I'm going to listen to these people. I'm going to listen to them. But if they're wrong, I won't do anything. I'll just know that they were wrong. The first third basically introduces us to all of the characters that we're going to meet. Mr. Norrell is a magician. He is a pompous, arrogant arse, and he hates anyone else having magic. He is very rich, and he uses his resources to just buy every single magic book going. And this is an alternate version of England in the early 19th century. And people thought that there were no actual magicians anymore. Magic was studied, but it wasn't practiced. And then Mr. Norrell shows up being able to do some magic tricks, and everyone's like, oh, amazing. But he does not work well with others. So imagine my surprise when he takes on a pupil, Jonathan Strange, and he teaches him magic. So reluctantly does he teach him, and he withholds all of this information, and he tells him things, and he does teach him, but it's so reluctant, and it's so, he just grudges every ounce of knowledge he shares with this man. Jonathan Strange is much more likeable than Mr. Norrell, but the bar is low. In addition to these 2 main characters, there is a gaggle of what we could probably just call the lads. Mr. Norrell's got his assistants, his little hangers-on, and Jonathan Strange has got some kind of higher up friends. He's got some friends who are in politics. I am not enjoying any of the main characters or their gaggle of lads, but I am enjoying what is probably a side story, and it features what I'm going to call a fairy king. We don't know his name, but he is referred to as the man with the thistle down hair. And I don't know what that means, so I'm just going to say that it's kind of like a thistle, like the flower. I don't know why I'm trying to make the shape of a thistle. I can't do it with these fingers. I don't know why. I'm trying to. The top of a thistle is kind of like white and fluffy. So I'm going to guess he's got white, like a white pompadour is the hairstyle I imagine he has. He's this kind of fairy guy who just shows up causing chaos. And he has taken a fancy to Lady Pole, who is the wife of Jonathan Strange's friend. And Lady Pole and the man with the thistle down hair have their own side story happening. And I'm really enjoying that. There's also a man called Stephen Black who works for Lady Pole and her husband. I've forgotten his name. We will call him Mr. Lady Pole. He is also involved. His name is Stephen Black. He's also involved with this fairy storyline. And I'm really enjoying it, but at the same time, I know that story. I know it. I don't know if the author has maybe taken from a classic fairy story or been inspired by something, but I know this fairy story, and I know I've not read this book. I would have remembered it. I did Google when I was looking up Thistle Down Here, and there was a BBC adaptation of this, but I haven't watched it because it doesn't look like something I would have watched. I like my things to be a little bit brighter or a little bit duller. It's too in the middle. It's too kind of, I don't know, it doesn't look like a visual that I would have sought out, and I just don't think I've watched it. So I don't know why the fairy story in this is so super familiar to me. Maybe it's just a common fairy story, but it is ultimately the only part of the book that I'm enjoying. But I'm carrying on because I got told it gets better. I hope it does. I have three updates. That was my stomach. I don't know if the camera picked that up, but my stomach just made a weird noise. I went out for a massive walk today, and I went to there's a plant-based cafe in Aberdeen called Grounded, and it's always hoaching. Whenever I go, it's so busy. But I went with a mind to get takeaway. So I got takeaway, and I got a white chocolate and toasted coconut cruffin, and then like my ears hurt from how sweet it was, but in the best kind of way. I don't have a sweet tooth, so I ate that when I came home, but I went and got a coffee at Common Sense and enjoyed. There was a little pipe band playing. There were little kids just tooting their little bagpipes. I don't know what for. Why not? Do we need a reason? No. So I enjoyed that while reading a little bit of my book. I want you to let you know what new book I have started. I've started reading Wee Pretty Pieces of Flesh by Colwill Brown. This book was recommended to me by a couple of people last year. I saw it on a few people's like books of the year list, and I went, noted, sounds great. It is about a trio of friends growing up in Doncaster in the 2000s. So we are like the same age. So I really wanted some nostalgia because I love a coming of age story, but I don't know. There's something about when it does cover your own period of life that you're like, I don't know, it hits a bit differently. And that's what I wanted. We have falling out of the jacket. We have three women. They're girls at this point. Kel, Rach and Shaz. And they are all living in Doncaster, which is in the north of England. The book has got a lot of what I think is maybe local dialect. I had to Google where Doncaster was, so I'm not familiar with the dialect, but Google and context clues are your friend here. I'm not having any problems with reading the dialogue. Each of these girls are growing up in working class homes, but they are all different kinds of working class homes. And I really like the way that the variety of working class lifestyles are represented in this book. We have Shaz, who lives at like the bad part of town. She gets free school lunches. I got free school lunches because low income household. And I was like, oh, I remember that. Yep. That's pretty much where my similarities with Shaz end though, because she is a bit of a wild child. She's quite tiny physically, but she has a massive presence, and she's so confident, and she's very loud when she needs to be, and she doesn't want to impress people. She doesn't set out to impress people, and I really like her as a character. I want to give her a big hug because she goes through it. We have Rach, who lives at like the nice part of town in a kind of fancier house. She brings her own ice skates to the ice rink. She knows what she wants to do when she grows up. She wants to go to university and she wants to be a teacher. And then we have Kel, who is kind of in the middle of these two. She lives in the nice part of town, but she lives at the sort of rougher part of the nice bit of town. She is sort of the bridge between Rach and Shaz. And she spends a lot of her time, in the short amount of the book that I've read so far, I'm about a quarter or so through it, she spends a lot of this time trying to just keep the peace between Rach and Shaz because they are so very different, but they're also not. I'm really loving the nostalgia and I'm having a great time with this. I want to pick this up, and the only reason I stopped reading it was because I was reading outside, it started raining, and I didn't want to get more raindrops in my book. I am also now, I have finished part 2 of Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, and I feel safe in saying I think I hate it. I truly think I hate this book. And that's okay. I'm going to keep reading it though, because I've committed. I've gotten so far that I want it to mean something, so I'm going to finish it. I can appreciate the writing of the book. I can appreciate the good things about it, but ultimately I am bored. I am painfully bored by this book. I am just reading it going, could these rich, privileged men argue a little bit more? Maybe. Like, I don't understand how such an exciting premise of bringing magic back to England, using magic in the Napoleonic Wars, I don't understand how this can be made dull. That's a talent. Piranesi was so good as well. I just don't understand it. I loved Piranesi, but Piranesi was also 200 pages. It was so short that it left me wanting more, whereas this leaves me wanting compensation. I am still loving the fae elements of this book. I am enjoying the storylines that feature Lady Pole, Stephen Black, the Thistledown Hair Man, and now Arabella, Jonathan Strange's wife. I am loving those sections. They are fantastical and they are exciting and they are eerie, but they leave me wanting more. And then I go back to privileged men argue. I mean, that's it at its core. But I will finish the book. I'm on the third part, which is actually very interesting. The third part is actually titled John Usglass, who is considered to be like the man who brought magic originally from the Fae world to England centuries ago, and he disappeared. So I'm really excited here because I'm thinking I'm maybe going to get some more maybe some free stuff, maybe some lore. And I've had a little bit of lore, but I feel like the lore, call me old fashioned, but if you're giving me lore in a book, needs to be before the 600 page mark. It needs to be. I will finish this book. The goal is to have this finished by the end of this week because my parents are coming up to visit and I just don't want to sully a lovely visit by having to read this book. So I'm going to finish this. I will report back. That's why I picked Wee Pretty Pieces of Flesh, because I knew I was going to love that and I wanted to have a book I'm not really enjoying and a book that I am. I know I should have DNF'd this. No point now. I'm in too deep. I'll be back with an update. I have good news, but I also have bad news. Let's start with the good news. I made a rhubarb compote. I spent all of my life thinking I hate rhubarb. I was wrong. I love it. I just hate raw rhubarb because that's normal. Stewed rhubarb, delicious. Cook it, break it down, delightful. I also went for a nice little walk to the university. Got far too much sunshine. So much sunshine, it was so bright. And I read some of my books and I have updates. The bad news is that I read more of this book. I have a sneeze coming on, I can feel it. I can feel it coming. I have finished reading Jonathan Strange or Mr. Norrell and my group chat with my friends was actually postponed. Maybe that's more, was that good or, I don't know. We were all really tired. It's going to be next week, which means I can talk about this book with them because some of them have read it. I hated this book. I will agree. There are people who say that the book picks up towards the end, and it does. But I would say the book is 1006 pages, and giving me a couple of good pages near the end does not make up for the beginning. I hated this, but I realised that that just doesn't really give you, that doesn't give you much. I hated it, and what? I will tell you what. I did not like the way that this book told you it was clever. I love a clever book, but I love being able to see for myself and determine for myself that the book is clever. Or, you know, it can tell me later. But instantly this book is like, I'm so clever. I told a friend that this book gave me the same vibe as a man who brings out a guitar at a house party, and I stand by that. It just rammed down your throat that it's so clever, and it was, but I didn't get to decide that. I had that told to me instead, and that took away any enjoyment I could have gotten from a book being clever. For a book featuring magicians, I found it to just be so painfully dull. I am not opposed to a slow-paced book, but there has to be something that we are building to. There has to be some character development. There has to be story development. Yes, this was a very rich world. I loved the world building, but I hated the way that the world building was delivered, mainly through footnotes. I have ranted before about footnotes. I don't generally enjoy a footnote in a book. I feel that if it's a historical book, fair enough, you're giving me some context because the book was written in a different time. However, this is a contemporary book, and I feel like if a book has a footnote, if the contents of that footnote are longer than a sentence, it needs to be part of the book. It needs to be part of the book. There was a 6-page footnote in this book, and I will be complaining about that for months to come. I just know I will. I hated it. I hated the way it kept taking me out of the story to tell me something that was much more interesting than what I was reading, and then take me back to the boredom. I felt there was very little in the way of character development for a very long book that spanned a lot of years. Very little character development. The most interesting characters for me were the man with the thistle down hair, the fairy, Stephen Black, Arabella and Mrs. Pole. Basically everyone involved in the fairy storyline. But again, they didn't really get character development either. They just had a much more enjoyable and interesting storyline. I can appreciate all of the positives that people have said about the book. Yes, the writing's beautiful. Yes, it is a very, very rich world that has had so much thought put into it. It does talk about hoarding resources, the hoarding of knowledge, people who don't want to share the knowledge or educate other people who want to learn. But I was bored. I was bored. I didn't enjoy it. I'm glad I've read it, because otherwise this was just going to sit on my shelf for years, just looking at me going, read me, read me. And now it can't, because I've read it and I didn't like it. I want to forgive this and I want to forget it. And as this is the end of the vlogging week, I wanted to give an update on where I am with the rest of my reading. I am loving Wee Pretty Pieces of Flesh. I have about 80-ish pages left. I am loving this. I am loving the nostalgia. I am loving the characters. I am loving how realistic this book is. And it is so special to me to be able to read a book that focuses on working class millennials. I feel so seen. I did not have a lot of the same experiences as these girls, but I knew them. And there were elements that did feel relatable to myself. There might be more that come later. I don't know. I've still got some of the book to go. But I am so far loving this. I'm getting 5-star vibes, but I don't know what's going to happen in the end of the book. And I don't know if we're going to have a happy ever after. There's not a lot of book left. There's still a lot of story that I am hoping to have. So I just don't know. But I'm loving this. It is told in a sort of Doncaster dialect, which I'm not familiar with at all. So it's taken me a little bit. I'm a bit slower reading it, but that's okay. I am fully immersed in this book. I'm loving it so far. And the book that I am reading to not replace Jonathan Strange or Mr. Norrell, but I do love a 2-book rotation, sometimes more. But for the purposes of 75 books, I've got 2 reading sessions. I want 2 books. I'm doing a reread of The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. I read this book in 2020. I have the gorgeous hardback edition that took a while to be able to track down, and I'm only a teeny tiny bit into this book so far. It is a fantasy story that is kind of a story within a story within a story. We have a graduate student who has found this mysterious book in a library, and the book references an incident with a young boy, and it is something that the protagonist went through himself. and he's just like, why is my childhood in a book? There is this mystical sort of underground society who guard books. Again, we've got the guarding of knowledge. So clearly I do enjoy something, some elements that Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell had. It's just I didn't like the way that book did it. And there are little stories that are told throughout. We've got a whole bunch of different interlocking stories, but I'm very excited to reread this. It's been 6 years since I read it, and I am a little fuzzy with regards to the contents, so that's why I wanted a reread. I've forgotten enough that I can go back and enjoy it. But like I say, I'm only at the beginning. He's only really just found out, wait, I'm in this book. What's going on? I will finish these 2 books next week. Hopefully more. Let me know if you've read any of these books, and I'm sorry if you enjoyed Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell and I've been mean about it. My opinion doesn't really matter that much to anybody other than myself. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!